Continuing with Book 3, Chapter 16, verse 31. She kept her fasts and broke them at the end of every third night. She entertained the gods, Brahmins, priests, and holy people with feasts and with due honors. She performed her daily ablutions. She distributed alms, and she practiced austerities and meditation. In all of these, she was painstakingly observant of the rules of pious devotion. She also attended to her unaware husband at the stated times. To the utmost, she took care of him and performed her duties as required by law and custom. Thus, observant of her vows, with resolute and persevering, painstaking, and unfailing austerity, the young queen passed 100 of her 3-night ceremonies. Saraswati, the fair goddess of speech, was pleased at the completion of Leela's 100th 3-night ritual. In the goddess' honor, performed with all outward and spiritual courtesy, the goddess spoke to her, saying, "I am pleased, my child, with your continued devotion to me and your constant devotion to your husband. Now ask the boon that you would have of me." Queen Leela replied, "Be victorious, O moon-bright goddess, to end all the pains of our birth and death and the troubles, afflictions, and evils of this world. Like the sun, put to flight the darkness of our affections and afflictions in this life. Save me, O goddess and parent of the world. Have pity on this wretched devotee, and grant her these 2 boons that she begs of you. The one is that after my husband is dead, my soul may not go beyond the precincts of this shrine in the inner apartment. The second is that whenever I call you, you shall hear my prayer and appear before me and give me your sight and blessing." Hearing this, the goddess Saraswati said, "Be it so," and immediately disappeared in the air, just like a wave subsides in the sea from where it had come into view. The queen, being blessed by the presence and good grace of the goddess, was as delighted as a doe at hearing sweet music. The wheel of time rolled on its 2 semicircles of fortnights. The spikes of months, the arcs of the seasons, the loops of days and nights, and the orbits of years. The axle, composed of fleeting moments, gave constant momentum to the wheel. The perceptions of King Padma entered into his subtle body, and in a short time he looked as dry as a withered leaf without its juicy claws. The dead body of the warlike king was laid over a tomb inside the palace. Queen Leela began to fade away at its sight like a lotus flower without the waters of its birth. Her lips grew pale from the hot and poisoned breath of her sorrow. She was in the agony of death, like a doe mortally wounded by an arrow. At the death of her Lord, her eyes were covered in darkness, like a house became dark when its light is extinguished. In her sad melancholy, she became leaner every moment. She became like a dried channel covered with dirt instead of water. She moved one moment and was then mute as a statue. She was about to die of grief, like the ruddy goose at the separation of her mate. Then the ethereal goddess Saraswati took pity on the excess of her grief and showed as much compassion for Leela's relief as the first shower of rain does to dying fishes in a drying pond. Chapter 17. Leela sees Padma and his court in the spirit world, checks her own court to make sure it still exists. Saraswati said, "My child, move the dead body of your husband over to that shrine, strew those flowers over it, and you shall have your husband again. Never will this body rot or fade as long as the flowers are fresh over it. Know that your husband will surely return to life again. His individual soul, pure as air, will never leave this cemetery of your inner apartment." The black-eyed queen, her eyebrows resembling a cluster of black bees, heard the goddess' consolatory speech and was cheered in spirit, like a lotus bed upon return of the rains. She placed the corpse of her husband on the shrine, hid it under flowers, and remained in expectation of its rising, like a poor man fosters hope of finding a treasure. It was midnight of the very day, when all the members of the family had fallen fast asleep, that Leela went to the shrine in the inner apartment. There, in the recess of her understanding, she meditated on the goddess of knowledge and called her in earnest from the sorrow of her heart. When she heard the divine voice addressing her, "Why do you call me, child? Why are you so sorrowful in your face? The world is full of errors, glaring as false as water in a mirage." Leela answered, "Tell me, goddess, where does my husband reside at present? What has he been doing? Take me to his presence, as I am unable to bear the load of my life without him." Saraswati replied, "His spirit is now wandering in the sky, of which there are three kinds: the physical, the firmament or region of worlds that can be sensed, and the other is mental. The region of the mind, the seat of the will, and creation. And the third is the spiritual region of consciousness, which contains the two others: Bhutakasha, the element space, Chitakasha, mind space, and Chitakasha, consciousness space. Your husband's soul is now in the sheath of the region of consciousness. Things can be found in consciousness space which do not exist here. as in passing from one place to another, you are conscious of standing in heaven, so you will instantly arrive at the intermediate region of the mental world lying between the physical and spiritual worlds. If after forsaking all your mental desires, you abide in the spiritual world, you will certainly come to the knowledge of that spiritual being who comprehends all in himself. It is only by your knowledge of the non-existence of the world that you can come to know the positive existence of that being, as you will now be able to do by my grace and by no other means whatever. Vasishtha said. So saying, the goddess repaired to her heavenly seat, and Leela sat gladly in her mood of excellent meditation, steadfast meditation. Within a moment, she left the prison house of her body. Her soul broke out of its inner bound of the mind to fly freely in the air like a bird freed from its cage. She ascended to the airy region of consciousness and saw her husband sitting there amidst a group of princes and rulers of the earth. He, as King Vidaratha, was sitting on a throne, hailed with the loud shouts of "Long live the king, and be he victorious." His officers were prompt in the discharge of their different duties. The royal palace and hall were decorated with rows of flags, and there was an assembly of innumerable sages, saints, Brahmins, and rishis at the eastern entrance of the hall. At the southern porch stood a throng of princes and chiefs of men without number, and standing at the western doorway, a bevy of young ladies. The northern gateway was blocked by lines of horses, carriages, and elephants. A guard advanced and informed the king of a war in the Deccan. He said that the Kanaric chief had attacked the eastern frontier, and that the chieftain of Surat had subjugated the barbarous tribes on the north, that the ruler of Malwa had besieged the city of Tonkin on the west. Then there was the reception of the ambassador from Lanka, coming from the coast of the southern sea. Next appeared the spiritual masters, Siddhas, coming from the Mahindra mountains bordering the eastern main, having traversed the many rivers of their river districts. Next appeared the ambassador of the Guyaka, or Yaksha tribes, that inhabited the shores of the northern sea. Likewise, there were envoys visiting from the shores of the Western Ocean, and relating the state of affairs of that territory to the king. The assembly of innumerable chieftains from all quarters filled the entire courtyard with luster. The sounds of Brahmins chanting on sacrificial altars were drowned under the sound of tambourines, shouted announcements, and the Lord praises, loud praises of speakers, all re-echoed by the uproar of elephants. The vault of heaven resounded to the sounds of vocal and instrumental music, and the dust raised by the procession of elephants and chariots and the trotting of horses' hooves hid the face of the sky like a cloud. The fragrance of flowers, camphor, and heaps of frankincense perfumed the air, and the royal hall was filled with presents sent from different provinces. His fair fame shone forth like a burning hill of white camphor, raising a column of splendor, reaching to the sky and casting sunlight into the shade. There were distinct rulers, busily engaged in their grave and momentous duties, and great architects who conducted the building of many cities. Then the ardent Leela entered the royal assembly hall of the ruler of men. She was unseen by any, just as one void mixes with another void, and as air is lost in the air. She wandered about without anyone there seeing her, just like a fair figure formed by false imagination of our fond desires is not to be perceived by anyone outside ourselves. In this manner, she continued to walk about the palace, unperceived by all, just like a castle in the air built in one's mind and not perceived by another. She saw them all assembled in the royal court in their former forms, and she saw all the cities of the princes concentrated in that single city of her Lord. She viewed the same places, the same dealings, the same concourse of children, the same sorts of men and women and the ministers as before. She saw the same rulers of earth and the very same pundits as before, the identical courtiers and the same servants as ever. There was the same assembly of learned men and friends as before, and the like throng of citizens pursuing their former course of business. She suddenly saw the flames of a wildfire spreading on all sides. Even in the broad midday light, and the sun and moon appearing at once in the sky and the clouds, roaring with a tremendous noise, with the whistling of the winds. She saw trees, hills, rivers, and cities flourishing with population, and the many towns and villages and forests all about. She saw her royal consort as a boy of 10 years of age. After shaking off his former frame of old age, sitting amidst with all his former retinue and all the inhabitants of his village. Leela, having seen all this, began to reflect within herself whether the inhabitants of this place were living beings or the ghosts of their former individual souls. Then, having recovered her ordinary sense, At the removal of her trance, she entered her apartments at midnight and found the residents bound in sleep. She woke her sleeping companions one by one and said she was anxious to visit the royal hall. She wanted to sit beside the throne of her lord and to clear her doubt by seeing the courtiers all alive. The royal servants rose up at her call, and obedient to her command, they said, "Be it so," and attended to their respective duties. A group of staff bearers ran to all aids to call the courtiers from the city, and the sweepers came and swept the ground as clean as if the sun had shed his rays upon it. A better set of servants cleaned the courtyard as clean as autumn days clear the sky of rainy clouds. Rows of lights were placed in the courtyard, looked as beautiful as clusters of stars in the clear sky. Throngs of people filled the courtyard, like the ancient earth had been covered by the floods of the great deluge. Dignified ministers and chiefs attended first and took their respective seats, appearing as if they were a set of newly created rulers of the various peoples of the world, or the regents of the quarters of the sky. The coolant and fragrant odor of thickly pasted camphor filled the palace, and the sweet-scented breezes profusely breathed the fragrance of the lotus flowers, which they bore from all sides. The chamberlains stood all around in their white garbs, appearing like an assembly of silvery clouds hanging over the burning hills under the equator. The morning breeze had strewn heaps of flowers over the ground, bright as the beaming dawn, dispelling the gloom of night, and bleached as clusters of stars fall upon the ground. The retinue of the chiefs and the land crowded the palace, which seemed like a lake full of full-blown lotuses, with fair swimming swans rambling about. There Leela took her seat on a golden seat by the side of the throne. She appeared as beautiful as Rati, seated in the joyous heart of Kama. She saw all the princes seated in their order as before, and the elders of the people and the nobles of men and all her friends and relatives seated in their proper places. She was highly delighted to see them all in their former states. Her face shone brightly like the moon, to find them all alive again. Chapter 18. Leela wonders which world is real. Saraswati explained. Leela said, "I have much consolation in you, and now I will console my sorrowing heart." So said, she made a sign for the assembly to break and rose from her royal seat. She entered the inner apartment and sat by the side of her dead body of her lord, hidden under the heap of flowers, and began to reflect within herself. She thought, oh, the wonderful magic that presents these people of my palace, situated in the same manner outside myself, as I saw them seated within me in my meditation. Oh, how great is the extent of this delusion that contains the same high hills and the same special forests of palms and hintala trees, situated both outside and within me. Like a mirror shows the reflection of hills within itself. As they are without it, so the reflection of the intellect presents the whole creation inwardly, as it does outside of itself. I must now invoke the goddess of wisdom to determine which of these is illusion and which is the sober and certain reality. So thinking, she worshipped and invoked the goddess and immediately saw Saraswati in the form of a virgin. She made the goddess sit on an elevated seat and, having seated herself low upon the ground before her, asked that divine power to tell her the truth. Leela said, "Be gracious, O goddess, and clear this doubt of your suppliant. For it is your wisdom that first framed this beautiful system of the universe and knows the truth. Tell me, O great goddess, about what I am now going to relate to you. For it is by your favor that I may be successful to know it. I saw the pattern of this world in the intellect, which is more transparent than the ethereal sphere, and so extensive that it contains millions and millions of miles in its small space. No definite words can express what is known as the calm, cool, and indescribable light. This is called unintelligible intelligence, and is without any cover or support. Nirvana, Nirbiti. It exhibits the reflections of space and the course of time, and those of the sky and its light, and the course of events concentrating in itself. Thus, the images of the world are to be seen, both within and outside the intellect, and it is hard to distinguish the real and unreal ones between them. The goddess asked, "Tell me, fair maiden, what is the nature of the real world that you mean by its unreality?" Leela replied, "I know the real is where I find myself sitting here and looking upon you as seated in this place. What I mean by unreal is the state in which I saw my husband in the ethereal region some time ago, because emptiness has no limit of time or space in it." The goddess replied, "Real creation cannot produce an unreal figure. A similar cause cannot produce a dissimilar effect." Leela replied, But, O Goddess, we often see the similar effects produced from similar causes. The earth and an earthen pot are similar in substance, yet one melts in the water and the other holds water. The goddess said, yes, when an act is done by the aid of auxiliary means, then the effect is found to be somewhat different from the primary cause. Thus, the earthen pot, produced by the auxiliary appliances of fire, the potter's wheel, and the like, differs in its quality from the original clay. Say, O beautiful maiden, what were the causes of your husband being born in this earth? The same led to his birth in the other world also. When the soul has fled from here, how can the material earth follow him? And what auxiliary causes can there be in connection with this cause? Wherever there is a contributing cause, in addition to the apparent cause, everyone usually attributes the result to some unknown prior cause or motive. Leela said, I think, O Goddess, that the expansion of my husband's memory caused of his regenerations, because it is certain that memory is the cause of reproductions of objects before us. The goddess replied that memory is an aerial substance, and its productions are as unsubstantial as itself. Leela said, yes, I find the memory to be an airy thing, and its reproduction of my husband and all other things within me are only empty shadows in the mind. The goddess replied, therefore your husband and all those other things that appeared to your sight in your reverie truly were such reproductions, my daughter. And so is the appearance of all things I see in this world. Leela said, tell me, goddess, in order to remove my conception of the reality of the world, how the false appearance of my former Lord was produced before me by the unreal world. The goddess replied, as this illusory world appears a reality to you before you had memories of it, so you must know that all this unreal from what I am going to relate to you. Saraswati speaking. In some part of the sphere of consciousness, there is the great fabric of the world, with the glassy vault of the firmament for its roof on all sides. Mount Meru, the polar axe or mountain, in its pillar, surrounded by the regions of the 10 sides, like statues carved upon it. The 14 regions are like so many apartments of it. And the hollow vault containing the 3 worlds is lighted by the lamp of the luminous sun. The corners are inhabited by creatures resembling ants. They are surrounded by mountains appearing as anthills in the sight of Brahma, the prime lord of creatures, and the primeval patriarch of many races of men. All animal beings are like worms, confined in cocoons of their own making. The blue skies and below are like the soot of this house, beset by bodies of departed spirits, resembling groups of gnats buzzing in the air. The fleeting clouds are the smoke of this house, or like spider webs in its corners. And the hollow air is full of aerial spirits, like holes of bamboos filled with flies. There are also the playful spirits of gods and demigods hovering over human houses, like swarms of bees, busy buzzing bees, about vessels of honey. Here and there, amidst the cavity of heaven, earth, and the infernal region, lay tracts of land, well watered by rivers, lakes, and the sea on all sides. In the corner of this land was a secluded piece of ground, sheltered by hills and crags about it. In this secluded spot, sheltered by hills, rivers, and forests, there lived a holy Brahman man with his wife and children, free from disease and care of gain and fear of a ruler. He passed his days in his fire worship and hospitality with the produce of his cattle and lands. So this is a very interesting story, and from it, what have we learned? We could say that there's this old familiar phrase, as above, so below, but of a different order. This is what this story was relating to us. The physical world is only real to us because we came into it without a memory of it. It was always there around us, and we have no memory of it not existing before. But when we have experiences of celestial worlds, it's a little different experience, isn't it? When we experience celestial worlds, we have a memory of the physical world as different from the celestial world. So that gives us the sense that the physical world is real and the celestial world is unreal. But if we take a different perspective, we take the perspective of the celestial world, then we could just as easily say the celestial world exists and existed before the physical world. And so the physical world is unreal as a projection of the celestial world. But of course, we understand that both the celestial world and the physical world are unreal, aren't they? Both the celestial realms and the physical realms are created in the consciousness of the Creator. The Creator is consciously imagining, then letting go of that imagination of the realm of Goloka, like performing sanyama. A brief thought of the beauty of Goloka and all the people there, letting go of that, coming back to self. What happens? His consciousness produces a waking, induced lucid dream. And that lucid dream is our universe. From the perspective of the Creator, there's no doubt. This universe is being created by my mind, in my mind, as a dream, and I am aware of this dream. Exactly like when we create a lucid dream. During our Sahasra Sirsha Brahma meditation, we are repeatedly creating these waking induced lucid dreams, aren't we? We're seeing communities. We're seeing the entire universe as being a dream in our own mind. We're seeing a large group of 1,000 meditators meditating and performing the Sahasra Sirsha Brahma meditation. And we're observing how those 1,000 meditators are experiencing the universe as a dream within their own mind, and how they're experiencing 1,000 meditators meditating, and how they're experiencing 1,000 communities around the world. And what we're discovering is the incredible fractal nature of consciousness. Consciousness is like a repeating pattern. The universe is like a repeating pattern. Everything in the universe is a repeating pattern. So we're giving ourselves this wonderful understanding, realization of the nature of consciousness. And if we analyze the nature of consciousness in more detail, we discover that it is a binary phenomenon. It is momentarily on and then off, then on, and then off. During the periods of it being on, this is manifestation, this is creation, this is universes appearing. And during the moment that it is off, this is dissolution, this is no universes, this is total, utter darkness. And this on-off cycle repeats itself in all different time frames, from instantaneous to multiple eons.